I'm joined by David Gauke, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and Peter Dowd is Labour's Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He's in Liverpool. Evening to you both. David Gauke first. Make your pitch to the people of Wigan. What can you do to revitalise or upgrade the economy there?
Well, first of all, I think your report hit on a really important thing. If we want to improve living standards, if we want to afford good public services, we've got to improve productivity, we've got to create the wealth. So that is absolutely key. Now, how do we do that to benefit, say, Wigan? Part of it is about infrastructure. We've got to be fiscally credible, but actually, yeah, you've got to put the infrastructure in, you've got to improve the transport links. I think, for example, bringing those northern towns and cities together, that's very much what's driven the Northern Powerhouse thinking. I think that's really important. I think making sure that we are forward-looking and innovative. There's a role for government there in helping research and development. There's a lot of work that we're doing with Innovate UK, but we've said in our manifesto that we want to be the most innovative country in the world, and so looking forward to that.
Just
but in terms of providing support for research and development, for example, seeing that as a priority, I think that is very important, and I think skills and training as well.
So more money for skills and training, because I didn't find any in your
Well, there was
manifesto.
more money for skills and training set out in the budget in March, and it's not, of course, just about money. It's also about making sure we've got the new T levels, so properly recognised.
So let's hold your thoughts. Thank you very much. Let's go to Peter Dowd, because Peter, I want to hear what your pitch to the people of Wigan would be, and whether it's actually any different to what David Gauke says, whether we can distinguish between the position of the parties on this.
Well, for a kick-off, I don't think austerity has worked, and we've got low levels of productivity has been set out in the piece. Investment is pretty dreadful. Skill levels are poor.
Right. And what do you want to do about it? Sorry to interrupt. I do want to get to what you do about it.
Well, OK. Well, the issue on that one is that you need investment. To get levels of productivity up, you need investment in capital and labour. And whether that's in education, whether it's actually in physical infrastructure, that's what we actually need. And what we've got is a woeful lack of investment in that. And that's what you need. The key to this is investment.
Right. And how much are you investing in education? Because I'm looking at your spending commitments. You've got a lot more for schools, in fairness, a lot more for schools. Is that going to make a difference? You've got a bit more for skills, but a lot of that's on, EMA and things like that. Is that what you're saying is the difference between you and the Conservative Party in what you'll do for Wigan? Is that it?
Well, we're talking about a £25 billion investment in education from, in a sense, from the cradle right the way through life. So it's investment in early years, it's investment in secondary education, it's investment in further education and skills, which is taking a terrible battering. It's investment in university and generally in lifelong learning.
Does that include
skill people? Does
that include the 11 billion you're spending on student grants? So really, but getting on for half the total budget is on students. Can I just ask, are you expecting more people to go to university as a result of your free tuition?
Well, I think it's going to be a mix. I think many people will go to university, but that's the whole point.
Are you expecting more? It's quite simple.
Well, there may well be.
If you're spending 11 billion and we get the same output, it's not going to be helping a lot, is it?
I would expect them to go more, but it's a refresh. It's a different look about an education service. It isn't just focused on university students or primary or secondary. It's got to be a holistic approach over a long period of time to our education service. And what we've had is an atomisation and a fragmentation of our education service. So while Rome burns in terms of education, we've got stuff about grammar schools, we've got the issue about academies,
I want to go back
free schools. The point I'm trying to make is that until you get a coherent education service from cradle to grave virtually, we're just going to continue down this path of lack of skills.
Right. Isn't there something in the fact that you just need to spend a lot more on schools? You can't just talk about skills. The one thing Labour have got that is different is a few billion next to the skills budget, which you haven't got, David.
Well, in terms of the manifesto, actually, we're putting more money into schools than we'd previously set out. But I think there are two important points about investment here. First of all, if we're talking about government investment, if you like, you've still got to maintain that credibility with the markets. If you're going to be borrowing that money, they're not going to lend it to you if they don't think you're going to pay it back. The second point is, if we're looking at private investment, companies, businesses have got choices all around the world. You have got to have an economy that welcomes investment, that is business friendly, and you won't attract investment in the UK when there are many, many choices for businesses if, for example, you're making our tax system less competitive, which is what the Labour Party are proposing.
So it's very interesting, because you are actually going back to, if you like, the previous Conservative view that you need a deregulated, strong deregulated, business-friendly economy. But I suppose the question people might ask is, why should we believe in interventionism, which seems to be what you were starting out with, from a party that has been sceptical about intervention for the last 30 years? Why would we expect you to do it?
I think there's a caricature. There is no contradiction in saying you want to be business friendly, you want to attract private investment into the UK, you want to have a tax system that is an asset to bringing investment in, not a liability. But there is also a role for the state, and that comes in, not in supporting failed businesses and so on in a kind of 1970s industrial strategy. It's a modern industrial strategy that focuses on, what do areas need? In some places it is about skills and training. In some places it is more about research and development. In other places it's about transport.
Well, a little bit of everything,
and also an important point.
Hard to know really whether it's going to work or what effect it'll
have. But also
have,
a governance point as well that we shouldn't miss. And one of the things that we have done, we've just had elections for metro mayors, for example. We are getting, proper devolution to the area so people can respond to those local needs. Can
I ask you to hold that, because I just want to spend a few minutes with you, Peter, on the issue that David Gauke raised about, it is eye-watering how much you are expecting to raise out of British companies. I mean, it's 19.4 billion on the corporation tax, 1.6 billion on offshore companies, 4 billion more or less on corporate tax reliefs. You've got the stamp duty proposal, that's 6 billion. You've got your avoidance measures, let's call that, it's 7 billion, but let's call it 3 from companies. It is basically 30 billion quid or so that you're taking out of corporate profits. Now, have you researched or looked at or done the homework on what the effect of that will be on investment?
Well, look, the issue at the end of the day is we need investment in the country, and everybody has to pay their fair share of taxes. The Tories are cutting corporation tax down to 17%. When we have it at 26%, it'll still be lower. It'll still be lower than it was in 2010.
Have you done any research on the effect? Remember, we raise about 50 or 60 billion in corporation tax. You're adding 20 billion plus a load of other corporate taxes to that. That is quite a big increase. It's not impossible, but it's a big increase. Have you researched the effect that will have on corporate investment?
Well, look, yes, corporate investment will continue as far as I'm concerned. Corporate bodies currently have about, corporate bodies currently have £500 billion sitting there not being invested. And what we need to do is to try and move that investment on. So it's about a private and a public partnership in all of these issues. So it's not just about the state or the private sector, it's about both pushing and pulling together.
Companies invest about, I don't know, call it 200 billion plus or minus a year. You're taking 30 billion out of companies, and you don't know whether that is going to affect investment.
No, I didn't say that.
Investment is the cornerstone of your policy.
No, I didn't say that. I said it wouldn't impact upon investment.
And what can you tell me what evidence you have to support that assertion? Have you done some research?
Well, the assertion is this. You have to look at all the other economies we've just been talking about in the G7. Their levels of tax for corporations are higher than the British levels, and they still have huge amounts of investment.
Can I just check?
So it's there.
Can you be sure that £30 billion, which would be probably one of the biggest tax increases we've ever known, can you be sure that that wouldn't affect the pensions of people who are not part of the richest 5%, but just perfectly ordinary people, that wouldn't affect pensioners who rely on their savings or their ISAs? Can you be sure that if you just whip out the equivalent of £500 for every person in the country from companies, that won't impact ordinary people?
I don't believe it will be, because the whole point about the investment is to grow the economy. If you grow the economy and GDP goes up, you get more tax. I mean, it's straightforward. You invest into the economy, you get a return on your investment.
Peter Dowd, thank you very much. Let me finish with you, David, a few more questions, if I may. You're the spending guy in the government, aren't you? You're the spending czar. Yeah,
I was the tax guy. I'm now the spending guy.
But you let a manifesto go through with no figures in it. How did that happen?
Well, we set out a budget in March.
No, but you've changed it in your manifesto, and you have no costings or numbers. You just plonk them in. They'll raise defence spending by 0.5% above inflation every year.
We for a long time have been saying that we would do that, actually, in terms of defence spending.
So it's been costed, has it? It's all been factored into the budget numbers.
But there's if you look at what we have done, in contrast, I have to say, with the Labour Party, this is not a long wish list of proposals. It is the case that we have identified more spending, for example, on social care, but we've said where we would find money to fund that. It is the case that we would spend more on schools, but again, we've identified areas
people
where
who like these things just hope we have elections more often, and then they'll get more money thrown at these things.
Well, we're not throwing money around as the Labour Party are willy-nilly. This is a pretty cautious manifesto that also addresses some of the long-term issues in terms of the public finances. So I think it's sensible and recognises the constraints that continue to exist in the public finances, which frankly we have not seen from the Labour Party at all.
There are a couple of other stories I want to ask you about tonight. One is President Trump pulling the United States out of the Paris climate change agreement. Leaders of France, Italy and Germany have all signed a joint declaration regretting what President Trump has done. Theresa May has not, and I gather that she has chosen not to join that. Do you think maybe she should have signed a regret on that?
Well, I think Amber Rudd last night, this point came up in the programme last night, and she made it clear that we thought it was regrettable. Clearly, the UK led the way in terms of the Paris Agreement, so we do think it is regrettable. But different countries will take different approaches in terms of how we wish to express our opinion.
I just wonder how you feel, because the EU and China were talking today. They want deeper integration and more cooperation on these kinds of issues. Then you have the US stepping out, really, of the multilateral global system. And we seem to be being pulled towards the US. Are you kind of comfortable in that kind of...
I don't think that's a fair categorisation, particularly in the context of the Paris Agreement, where, after all, the United Kingdom played a leading role. So we're very much engaged in a multilateral process, and very engaged indeed. So, in terms of how we express our views on the US government's position, I mean, different countries will take different approaches. But as I say, Amber Rudd was very clear last night before.
Amber Rudd was, I mean, the "Where's Theresa" hashtag is going to get more play tomorrow, isn't it? When she's not there giving a reaction.
The government position is clear. We are disappointed.
OK, one other story tonight, which is there seems to be some confusion about whether the tens of thousands pledge on immigration, this one that's been hanging around your neck for quite a few years, is whether this is, as one of your colleagues said today, is a pledge to get it down, to achieve it by the end of the Parliament, or whether it's a somewhat looser aspiration. Can you tell us what you think it is? What is the tens of thousands reference?
Well, we want to achieve it. It's important that we do control immigration. Only the Conservative Party has the desire to do so. We want to do it as soon as we can. There are obviously factors that are not totally within our control that can move things around a bit. I think if we are to achieve that, then clearly getting a good Brexit deal is part of that process. So that's one of the factors that needs to be considered. There's also, I've made this point before, is that we had a period of time when the UK economy, jobs market was growing very, very strongly, and Southern Europe was performing very badly, and that had an impact on it. But yes, we would like to achieve it sooner than we can. It's an important ambition, and it's right that we try to control it.
But everything you've said tells me that what you're not doing is saying it's a pledge. It's like our pledge not to raise VAT. It's not in that category. It's a much looser aim, and you certainly don't want to put a kind of specific timetable on it. So it's not 2022.
We want to achieve it as soon as we practically can. We would want to achieve it, as I say, in terms of the time frame you're talking about. But I'm just noting that there are some extraneous factors, if you like, that can make that more difficult. But we want to make progress on this, and we will, because there's no magic bullet here. There is no wand that you can wave.
If universities should be pretty worried, shouldn't they? Because they'll get clobbered. Students will get clobbered if you can't find it any other way, won't they?
Well, we've also actually made it clear that when it comes to attracting the best and the brightest to this country, we want to do that as well.
David Gauke, thank you very much indeed. Thanks.